One of Magic's most ancient and coolest characters has finally received his own card. I genuinely never thought this day would come, and I am currently a mixture of surprise and delight.
Magic.
I am a wizard!
History.
I'm an old wizard!
The Magic Historian.
My bones hurt. Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles. My friends, never in my life did I think we would be getting a Garth One-eye card. Wizards of the Coast is digging really deep into the nostalgia, and I gotta say, I absolutely love it. And I know Garth is a big deal because I was hit with a wave of messages when he got spoiled. Some of them going, "Oh my god, Garth is here!" And I went, "Oh my god, Garth is here!" right back. And other people messaging me going, "Yo, who's Garth One-eye? What's the deal with this character?" And I went, "Oh, you don't know Garth One-eye? Oh, well, we've got to fix that situation." So that's what we are here today to do. So, Garth One-eye is the main character of the very first Magic the Gathering novel that was ever written. Now, old school Magic novels are quite different than current Magic novels, right? Because or I guess not even novels, but like side stories and things like that, because they tend to, at least the main story of each set, tends to focus specifically on planeswalkers. But planeswalkers weren't the major focus of old school novels. They certainly had influence over the worlds that we explored, but we actually explored them through the eyes of more low-level, mundane individuals, right? So, the story of Garth One-eye, we originally meet him in the city of Estark when he is 25 years old, okay? So, he has just come into the city of Estark. He is viewed as kind of a drifter and a vagabond, because how it works normally is there are these different fighting houses that exist in the city of Estark, right, where they have a massive arena and a massive festival. So these different houses, the mages from these houses are considered almost like minor nobility, and they fight amongst each other mostly just for show. But back then, it even ties in the concept of ante. So when we started playing Magic originally, we used to play for each other's cards, right? So they actually bring that concept into this story where they wager spells against each other when these fighters end up in battle, right? So at the beginning of the story, Garth is this kind of underdog. We really don't know what he's about, what his purpose is about, but we know that he doesn't respect the mages of this city, right? They've become greedy and overly violent. They've lost the glory of the old days, in his opinion, right? So over time, as we explore with Garth, what he starts to do is he starts to actually join these different noble houses. So he manages, through a combination of basically preying upon people's greed and fear, and in some cases just desire to nettle their others, like their adversaries. He basically turns all the house leaders against each other. I'm getting a little tongue-tied thinking about this, trying to lay it all out for you, because it's a huge novel, and I'm just trying to give you the salient points, okay? So, there were once 5 houses of Magic, right? But now there are only 4. So, all the colors of Magic have a house, except for the blue house, okay? The blue house is gone. It's been completely wiped out. All records of it have been destroyed, and nobody really talks about it. During the Night of Fire, the House of Blue was just disappeared into nothing as part of an absolutely sinister plot. So, Garth starts to basically join these different fighting houses because he has considerable magic prowess. Yes, he is a no-name fighter, but he has considerable power, and he ends up basically, for one house, he'll best the fighters of that house, and then he'll show up at that house and say, "Hey, I just beat some of your guys. They're not very powerful. I think you want to have me on your team." So then the guild leader there is essentially like, "Man, you know what? I don't like that you're getting in my face about this and you beat my guys, but at the same time, I do want to beat my opponents. So yes." So he ends up joining up with their house, because if you're part of one of the houses, you have the house's protection, and you don't have to worry. Basically, if you're just some rogue off the street, anything can happen to you. So he wends his way into the first house, and then basically through a series of different events, which we can totally cover in lore videos on Fantasy Geographic, he manages to move from house to house. So he goes into the first house, then he messes things up for that house intentionally and runs over to another house and basically is like, let me join you. And they go, but you just messed with him. And it's like, yeah, I did mess with him, but guess what? He's got less fighters now for the big festival at the end of the year, right? And you're going to be a part of that. You want me on your team, don't you? And he's like, yeah, you know what? I do want you on my team. And then Garth betrays that house leader and goes to another house. And that house leader's like, you know what? Yeah, I'm not sure I should accept you in, but it'll really make this other guy angry, and I would love to make him angry. So again, Garth is let in, and he progressively makes his way through all of these houses, making allies and enemies, moving up the ranks, and basically moving towards the ultimate event in the city. Because every year, for one glorious day, a planeswalker comes and visits the city of Estark. So they have this mage competition where all the houses fight off against each other. And the fighter that wins the entirety of the event, they actually get to go off with the planeswalker and go on a grand adventure. Basically, the planeswalker will take them as an apprentice and teach them the ways of the multiverse, right? So this event is a really, really big deal. But here's the problem. It's all a lie, okay? The Planeswalker is not taking the best fighter away. In fact, what he's doing is draining the life out of them and destroying them because the Planeswalker doesn't want any competition, okay? His name is Cthulhu. He doesn't want any competition whatsoever. So every year, he's essentially culling the best fighter from this particular event. Now, how did this all come to be? Well, Cthulhu was actually the person who ruled over the city of Estark. And on the night that the House of Blue was disappeared, Cthulhu became a planeswalker. So back in the day, you didn't have planeswalker sparks. How Cthulhu became a planeswalker was to actually gather up an absurd amount of mana. And by having that much power, he was able to breach the veil between worlds and leave the plane and become a planeswalker, right? So the whole plan basically, like underlying the festival, is that Cthulhu's going to show up and take away the most powerful individual to destroy them, so nobody else can rise up and take his place. But at the same time, Cthulhu's right-hand man, who was left behind and is now in charge of everything, running it all for the Planeswalker, he secretly has desires to become a Planeswalker himself. So he has been hoarding crazy amounts of mana, and one of the other house leaders was the one who helped research all of the spells that were required to become a planeswalker. So behind the scenes, these other house leaders are vying to become their planeswalkers on their own. There's a lot of deceit and backstabbing, right? So Garth is moving his way through all these houses. He doesn't respect the greed or avarice. He does not respect or care for any of the house leaders. And it slowly comes out that it turns out that Garth was part of the House of Blue. Essentially, Garth is the inheritor of the house. When you get to the final part of the story, where everybody is finally assembled for this grand festival, after all the manipulating and getting into the event under the guise of being part of another house, Garth went to the section of the arena that's walled off and not really used anymore, that used to be where Blue would compete from, and revealed himself as being from the House of Blue. Basically what happened was, on the night of fire, when Garth was only 5 years old, all the other houses came and slaughtered the entirety of his family. And to torture Garth's father even further, and his name is Galen, now that I remember it. His actual name is Galen. He went under the moniker of Garth One-eye. So, I'm going to continue to call him Garth, even though his name is Galen. So, Garth basically is a 5-year-old child. Cthulhu's right-hand man hates Garth's father and basically just wants to torture him further. So while he's butchering Garth's entire family, he takes Garth right in front of Garth's father and carves one of Garth's eyes right out of his head, just as a 5-year-old. And Garth goes screaming and wailing off back into the flaming house. And that was the last anyone saw of him. So they all assumed that he had died, but he didn't. Garth survived, and he manipulated and turned all these different guild leaders against each other to the point where he's able to go to this final competition, and he knows the Planeswalker is the one responsible for the destruction of his house and his family. And so he ends up winning the entire event, still pretending, though, that he doesn't know that ultimately that the planeswalker is going to try and destroy him, right? Garth pretends like, oh, it's a reward you're going to give me. And then at the last second, he gets into a magical battle with the planeswalker, reaches inside him, and pulls the magic that's necessary to planeswalk away from Cthulhu. And then Garth manages to planeswalk out into the blind eternities, leading Cthulhu behind him, just stuck on the plane because he couldn't escape now because Garth took his planeswalking abilities. So Garth goes and travels the multiverse and encounters all kinds of different planeswalkers and then returns basically to his own world, right? He heads back to Dominaria to live a normal life with the woman that he loves, fully healed, both eyes ready to go. Honestly, it's an epic, epic story. And I've given you the massively condensed version. You're missing a lot of awesome details, but I just saw it and was like, okay, for people who don't know Garth's story, all you got to know is it's absolutely epic. 5-year-old kid, they carve his eye out. He waits 20 years building his power and skill and then deftly manipulates the entire city to his own plan, ultimately overthrowing the planeswalker and becoming a planeswalker himself. It is so epic. Let's take a look at the actual card. I've been talking so much about the story. Let's look at the card. So he's 1 mana of every color, and this represents the fact that Garth actually used all kinds of different colors of spells. Even though he was of the House of Blue, he had magic that existed in different colors. In fact, over on Wizard's website, there's a list of all the different spells that he cast, and it's pretty funky. I thought about including them, but I realized if I did, we'd be here for an hour. So Garth is 5 mana for a 5/5 legendary human wizard. God, I love the artwork. He looks so cool. He's standing there with that one eye blazing. It's just like, he's just got this look like he's like, I know everything. I know everything that's going to happen. Everything moves to my will. Like, it's so awesome. Let's be real, though. I mean, Garth put a lot on the line here. He could have easily been killed at any point during all of this. He did a lot of gutsy things. His victory wasn't guaranteed, and that's part of what makes it more enjoyable. This is a really awesome revenge style story. So his ability is choose a card name that hasn't been chosen from among Disenchant, Braingeyser, Terror, Shivan Dragon, Regrowth, and Black Lotus. Create a copy of the card with the chosen name. You may cast the copy. You still pay its costs. The flavor text says, a humble appearance belies a master's skill. It's true. He was a master of a number of different magics, and he did look pretty much just like a peasant off the street. And that was to his advantage because all the nobles looked down at him, and he was able to absolutely decimate them, right? It's so, so cool. Now, his ability doesn't actually have anything to do specifically with his story. I read the article that Wizards put out talking about the creation of him, and they tried to give him an ability that resonated more with the story overall, but it just didn't gel right and create the right kind of card. So instead what they did was they tried to pick something that created the spirit of Garth. And that is the idea of, look, these spells are all from the original Alpha set, and when it came to that story, it only used cards from like the very, very first printing of Magic. So they picked spells that existed only at the beginning of Magic, and they picked one across all 5 colors and 1 artifact, right? So I thought that was pretty neat. I admit, when I read it and it said Black Lotus, I'm like, I know for a fact he never used a Black Lotus. But it's not about that. They just wanted to encapsulate the idea of a very powerful mage who had the ability to command magics of all different colors. And that works quite well. Honestly, I really like the funky idea behind this, where you can tap him and he's going to let you cast 6 different spells, and they're all fairly potent spells. And I figured, since, you know what, we're going over the story and we're talking about the card, we'll also go over all the cards that he can copy for those of you who may not be familiar with the super old school cards. All right, so the first one we have to look at is the Black Lotus, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, right? 0 to put out. Mono artifact, which means you can only use it once a turn. Add 3 mana of any single color of your choice to your mana pool, then it's discarded. Tapping this artifact can be played as an interrupt. So basically, mono artifact means it taps to activate. So Black Lotus is tap it, sack it, get 3 mana of any color. It is, I mean, it's the most iconic Magic card in existence. Let's be real. This is the one that people point to when you want to impress people and go, did you know there's a card worth tens of thousands of dollars? It's a flower, blah, 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 right? So Black Lotus, super powerful card. Interesting that they chose to include it, because if anybody wants to play Commander, can't use Black Lotus in Commander. But now you have a workaround where you can make a copy of Lotus. And who knows, maybe this is Wizards' insidious plan to be like, do you want to play with Garth? Well, you want to have all the cards to represent the copies that he makes, right? So if you get Garth, you better be safe and also pick up a Black Lotus. All right, so Black Lotus is by far the most expensive of all the cards that Garth is capable of using. Next up, we've got Brain Geyser. 2 blue and X. Actually, I found a few of these when I was sorting through a rare box last night. 2 blue and X. It's a sorcery. Draw X cards or force opponent to draw X cards. Current wording is target player draws X cards. I love the whole force opponent to draw X cards, just the wording of it, because most of the time, unless they can completely make you draw your entire deck, oh no, please don't force me to draw cards. It's just like, oh, he forced me to eat an ice cream sundae and he forced me to take a nap. It's like, nah, that's stuff I want anyways, you know? And the artwork is really straightforward on Brain Geyser. It's literally a brain opening up and just beep, firing out some magical knowledge. I mean, there's 2 brains here. No, there's 3. This is the first time I've ever noticed. I never noticed that there was a 3rd brain far off in the distance just blasting. Like, what even is this? It's just 3 brains floating in like a void above water, because you've got a dark night sky, but it looks like an ocean below them. Welcome to Brain Ocean, where we guys are all... Oh, wait, no, that doesn't sound good. I don't like that. Let us move on. Then we've got Disenchant. Now, this card, for me, I mean, you know what? Actually, we'll talk what the card is before I say this part. 1 white and 1, and notice it's got the old school white mana symbol. The newer sun has kind of like jagged zags to it, where the old sun was more just spiking outwards, right? So it's 1 white and 1 for an instant that says target enchantment or artifact must be discarded. Current wording, destroy target artifact or enchantment. Now, back in the day, I always wondered when I saw Disenchant, I was like, is this thing that's being disenchanted, does it exist? Because when I look at the artwork, the little red missile that's firing off, to me that's the Disenchant, and it's hitting this weird bird disc. Like, you've got like a magic rooster in the middle with glyphs around it and just kind of some Jiffy Pop tinfoil around it. I don't know. I always looked at this and went like, why is it shown like destroying something that doesn't exist? Why don't they have it disenchanting something that exists? I like that, like in more current times, when they make artifact destruction cards, they tend to show it destroying an artifact from the same set, which is a nice vibe. But the old chicken plate, never got to see that in Magic, but it's an alright spell, pretty solid. And you know what it's good for? It's good for getting rid of Power Struggle when you're playing Chandelar. If you guys haven't seen it already, the most salty episode of the Chandelar playthrough is the one where I have to fight against Power Struggle, and that's up on my other channel. I'll leave a link to the playthrough at the end of the video in case you want to check it out. So, the next card we have to talk about is Regrowth. I've always loved this card. 1 green and 1 for a sorcery. Return any card from your graveyard to your hand. Current wording, return target card from your graveyard to your hand. All right? The artwork is very, very straightforward, and I always found it very peaceful and nice. It's literally just a new tree is being grown. You can see that you're in a forest. There's the gigantic trunk of a tree right behind it. There's sunlight shining down, and there's this little tree going, whoop, I'm back, baby. And I gotta say, I've always just dug the very calm and cool vibe of this card overall. I dig it. Then we've got Shivan Dragon, and oh lord, was this guy a beast when Magic started. Holy dude, like it would just tear you apart. 2 red and 4 for a 5/5 flying dragon, and it's got fire breathing, which is pay 1 red. It gets +1/+0 until end of turn. Flavor text says, while it's true most dragons are cruel, the Shivan dragon seems to take particular glee in the misery of others, often tormenting its victims, much like a cat plays with a mouse before delivering the final blow. That really does add an extra like layer of malice to the dragon, right? Where it's like, not only are you going to get destroyed, you're going to suffer. And look at the angle too. You've got this dragon. It's in the middle of the night, right? The night sky is set behind it. This dragon is flying above you. It's turned its head down, and it's got its claw like it's just about to start shredding you, man. And then breathing fire on you. It's so absolutely intense. Do you know what I mean? Like, you look at this card and you go, whoa, this is so powerful. What am I supposed to do about this? What kind of answer could possibly get rid of a Shivan dragon? Oh, wait a minute. I could terror it. This is the black spell that he gives you access to. So Garth will allow you to terror something. So terror is obviously, again, a massive old school card. It is 1 black and 1 for an instant. Destroy target creature without possibility of regeneration. Does not affect black creatures and artifact creatures. Current wording would say destroy target non-black, non-artifact creature. It can't be regenerated. So terror always struck me in terms of the way that the artwork is used, because most of the art is like negative space, right? You look at it and the bottom, like rough 2/3 of the artwork isn't used at all. But then this horrified, terrified individual who's all caught up in this rictus sort of like wide-eyed maneuver is so intense. Their hair is turned white from the shock of it. Like, they've died a horrible, terrible death. And I mean, it is a great answer to a nasty dragon that's about to eat your face. But what an awesome selection of spells, right? Like, it totally feels like really well-known spells from back in the day. All these cards were heavily used. It's got that old school feel, and I have to say, they absolutely nailed it with Garth One-eye. So, my friends, I hope you enjoyed the video. I'm going to leave a link to my Chandelar playthrough and my Magic lore channel. If you like Magic the Gathering lore, I have a brand new lore video over there talking about the upcoming D&D set. Go ahead and check it out. Or if you want old school Magic lore, the Urza series over there is absolutely incredible. And good news, any fans of the Urza series, guess what? I finished the notes. So we're going to be going into recording it very, very soon. List of my top patrons scrolling on by. You want to support awesome videos like this? Consider hopping on my Patreon. Thanks for coming by, my friends. I will see you all next time.